Well, now that we can use Nvidia Dlss 4 within Twinmotion, let's talk a little bit about what this technology is in order to understand and apply it much better within our projects inside the software. So the first thing we need to know, and I'm here on this website, that's the official Nvidia site about DLSS technology. I'll leave the link in the description down below so you can check it too. That this is a technology that it's based on artificial intelligence and neural rendering technologies. It uses artificial intelligence to increase FPS, that is, to make our reproduction or rendering of our scene more fluid, reduce latency, and likewise improve image quality. So it's very important to understand that this DLSS is a suite of several functions or tools that we can implement. However, it's important or essential that we have an RTX card for it to work. It's mandatory. As we'll see later on here, there are many functions that are part of this DLSS suite, but not all of them are available for all RTX cards. Depending on the series that you have, you'll have access to certain options or not. And we'll see which one of these options are provided within Twinmotion. So in that sense, we're going to progressively review the features, and we're going to see which graphic cards apply to each of them and how we can use this option within Twinmotion. Well, then we have two very similar options here. One is multi-frame generation of multiple frames, and we also have DLSS frame generation, single frame generation. And what's the difference? Is that this multi-frame is a bit more advanced, and for each frame that we have, it will render up to 3 more. It will generate 3 more that will allow us to increase the FPS count in our scene. Let's take a look at this small comparative video so we can see how simply by activating DLSS 4, look, that multiplication factor is almost by 10 of the FPS that the scene was having. It's almost the same as this single frame generation, but the only thing that's happened is that additional frames are being added, but at a slightly lower rate. So what's interesting about these two options? Well, it will depend a lot on which graphic card you're using to be able to access one of them or not. The multi-frame generation that we saw is the option that will add the most frames per second to our scene. Is only available for RTX 50 cards. On the other hand, traditional or let's say the previous frame generation model is available for both 50 and 40 series. We will have a generation of frames but with a slightly lower rate, and it's not available on 30 and 20 series cards. Like the 3060, 2060, all those cards that are within those ranges will not have available the frame generation. So it's important that you keep this in mind, since in case you have one of these cards and it's trying to use the option in Twinmotion, well, you have problems. So now we know these two technologies. Let's go to the third one, the ray reconstruction. Let's see it over here. Is this technology that improves the image quality of our projects? It improves in a certain way the denoising process that's being done, generates pixels with a higher quality, and also having a higher sampling. However, this function that I found incredible, it's awesome, I've used it in Nvidia Omniverse and it's spectacular, but in Twinmotion it's not available yet. So now you know, we have the third one option here. Although it's available for all graphic cards, this is not part of Twinmotion yet. Super resolution, very important. Let's see it. And we see here that it's available for all graphic cards that are RTX card. What is super resolution doing? It's very simple. And if you have used Unreal Engine in the past, you may be familiar with the concept of super resolution. It's a technology that's used quite a lot within Unreal Engine. What's happening? It's for us to get a greater amount of FPS. In our viewport, let's check the viewport. I have this viewport, and it has an established resolution in the screen, as we see it here. Well, what super resolution does is to render to render faster is to decrease the size of this viewport image, just as we are seeing on the screen now. The image is rendering or calculating not at the entire size, but this one that we're seeing right now. And using neural networks and artificial intelligence, it enlarges it. So the small image is enlarged to the original size, generating pixels using artificial intelligence, which will allow the image to look almost as if it were the original rendering. However, we are achieving many more frames per second, even double than what we had before, because the rendered image is much smaller and it's been enlarged to give us a better result in terms of quality when scaling it using artificial intelligence, and in terms of fluidity, since as it's smaller, it renders faster, we have more frames per second. So yes, we will be able to use this. And lastly, we have their deep learning anti-aliasing. Let's look again. Up here, it's very simple. This is no longer related to the FPS, but to the visual quality. If you look and know, anti-aliasing, it would help us during rendering, especially during real-time rendering, to make our images look better. The edges of the objects, so they don't look jagged as here, but to look much more fluid, more natural, as we are observing in the second image. And this is a property that we'll be also able to apply within Twinmotion, and that is available for all 4 graphic card series that we have. So now we understand that what is this technology and how the different elements of the suites are applied and which ones are available to each of the graphic card series and for Twinmotion. We're now here within Twinmotion, and it's very important that you check the version you're using. You're using at least 2025.1.1 or higher, since this was the version where this suite of tools of DLSS was introduced. To use them, we must enter just as I've just done. We need to go to the Edit menu, the Preference option, or the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+P, and in the Quality section, we'll see that if you have used an earlier version, you will see that the options are different, and the important ones in this case are these ones, the super resolution settings. Probably initially you'll find these settings established, the ones that I have here, or maybe different. Let me hide for a second these tabs. We're not interested in this, and let's go back to preference, and very surely these are the options that you will find, or others, don't matter, we're going to analyze them all. So this scaling mode is related to what we saw earlier about super resolution. Do you remember? This, what we are seeing on the screen now, the image rendered by Nvidia, much smaller, then it's scaled using artificial intelligence so that we don't lose details, and as we render it smaller, we have many more FPS. Well, understood. So what does this other thing mean? Because we already see it here, DLS super resolution. What is this temporal super resolution? It's very similar. And this temporal super resolution is the default option used by Unreal Engine, which is the parent program of this Twinmotion software. And it's doing this super resolution process without us knowing it. It works exactly the same. The only thing that's changing is the technology. And we can see all the different settings so that we can have a different result. You can try either of them to see which one works better for you. But we're now exploring DLSS. So activate it. It's now working. And we now have these options down here. They will allow us to control the settings of the super resolution and will directly affect how good, how fast, or how bad, or how fluid will this scene look. The default setting, this automatic one, so the automatic will interpret all the content of our scene and will select the mode that we particularly better for what we're doing. Look, I've currently selected this small tab to be able to observe the FPS count that we have in our scene. We're handling a count close to 58. So let's go back here and let's change this quality. Let's start with the worst visual quality, but will give us an incredible performance called ultra performance. And look how the visual quality of what we are seeing completely degrades. Look, but however, observe the FPS count. They have almost doubled. The scene is much more fluid. However, it might be that FPS with this quality is not exactly what you're looking for, so we can continue playing with each of them, and you see that you have several settings: ultra performance, performance, balanced. We can even put quality here so that it looks quite decent. Look how the quality improved quite a bit, but the FPS count, I think this is the same as the auto option I was using before, and we also have another option known as DLAA, which is what we saw earlier for the anti-aliasing to work better. It's what will offer us in theory a better visual quality of all those options that we were checking right now. Look how even the edges look much sharper, more defined, the shadows look a bit better, but the FPS count has reduced quite a lot. You'll say, but that's a big sacrifice. Suddenly 30 FPS may be very little for this visual quality we're having, and it's true. However, we can use another of the options DLSS has that we saw earlier from the suite, which was frame generation. That option that allowed us to generate additional frames within our real-time visualization. This way, you could use an automatic value that determines what will be the best option, or multiply it by 2, by 3, by 4. I right now can simply choose the option of 2. I don't have the other 2 enabled, and I suppose this is related to the fact that my graphic cards, as we saw earlier, is an 4E series that doesn't have the option to use multi-frame generation, so that's why we're having this situation. However, I'm going to use this 2x. Let's see, we are at 29 FPS before activated, and when enabled, look, now the count is up to 55, 54, 53. It almost doubled the FPS counts that was showing earlier. I could, for instance, if I wanted to have even more FPS, reduce the quality a bit by removing the DLAA. Using quality or auto version, and now we have an FPS count of 78, 68, much higher, since it will all depend on how many movements you want to have inside your scene, how much you want to make it much more fluid. If we deactivate absolutely everything we had just configured, let's go back to temporal super resolution, let's remove this to off, and even here in the temporal super resolution, Twinmotion is already giving us the option of being able to configure it. Let's see that the default count is approximately 39 FPS. So you will decide now. The tools are being provided. Which option is offering you for you to see a better result, whether it's DLSS or whether it's temporal resolution. However, it doesn't matter which of the two you are using. You will always have access to this frame generation option that will allow you to double the amount of frames per second that you are handling in your scene. Look how we're using the temporal super resolution. Will look quite good. I really like it, how it works, but we're using the frame generation options so that our project goes much more fluidly. You will decide what to do with this information, but it's important that you understand how these functions work.